obviously, of being there. You heard Stephen A's point about Kaepernick. That was yesterday on our show. Do you agree with what he had to say?
Well, I think that there's a question that definitely has to be asked about the relationship between these two sides. The relationship is clearly broken. The relationship is fractured. It's not just a trust issue. It's a truth issue. And I think that when I look at what took place, there were really three things that jumped out at me. I got to the workout Saturday morning out in Flowery Branch about 5 hours before the workout was supposed to begin. And what we saw out there were three anti-Kaepernick protesters out there. And remember, you're out in Hill County, which went 73.7% for Donald Trump in 2016. So for Cap's politics, this is definitely hostile territory. And there were two people supporting Colin Kaepernick. Within an hour and a half, there were almost 120 people out there supporting Colin Kaepernick. And what hit me in watching all of this was, why doesn't this get to be an asset to Colin Kaepernick when we know if there had been 200 people out there against him, this would have been proof that the NFL did not want to sign him or couldn't sign him because the risk was simply too great. To Stephen A's point, I also understand that you have to have some give and take in a negotiation. That when you're looking at trying to, we're both black men in this country, we work for corporations, we know what you have to give up if you want to be in this environment. However, when you're talking about this waiver, you are asking Colin Kaepernick to give up everything. And I think that when you go into a negotiation, you are not expected to give up all of your rights, considering two of those rights were really clear. One was you were not necessarily protected from lawsuit if you walked in there and signed that agreement. And so I don't think that it would be, when I talked to one of Kaepernick's lawyers, he told me it would be malpractice if I allowed him to sign that document. So to me, what really took place here is that business should be conducted in a business-like fashion. This is an extraordinary circumstance. You've got two sides that don't like each other, that have been going at each other in litigation for almost 3 years now. And so what really needed to happen was you had to have both of these sides take the time, work out a deal that was agreeable to both sides, instead of this sort of 2-hour shoehorning thing where both sides got their backs up and then the whole thing fell apart.
Some new information has come out, which I think leads any reasonable person to the same conclusion, all reasonable people to the same conclusion. The first piece of information is now what I told you yesterday has been confirmed by independent sources. It was not a standard waiver. That was in dispute. The NFL disputed it. It was not the same waiver that normally is signed. It's a waiver with language that was more vague and could be interpreted in such a way as Kaepernick is forfeiting rights, which he'd be doing on the altar of a look-see from the team, right? That's one. And the second one is Kaepernick's people are saying, we were given a heads up by none of the teams, right? Like, it's not even like one team, hey, this is going to happen. We were blindsided by the NFL, like, hey, this is happening right now. It is their conclusion, therefore, that this is not coming from any of the teams, as has been reported, but is in fact coming from the NFL, this workout. So if you believe that, then you put those two pieces of new information together and to the conclusion that this whole thing was a way for the NFL to smuggle in, Trojan horse style, a waiver that Kaepernick would sign, signing away his rights. Recall, I couldn't figure out why this was done this way. Why so mysteriously? Why did it have to be on a Saturday? Why couldn't the date move? Why did he have almost no time to respond? Was it an ultimatum? Why couldn't he have his own camera people there? The whole thing, right? Why didn't they provide a list of personnel when they agreed that they would? Suddenly they won't. All these questions, why all of a sudden? I couldn't figure it out. Also, the Kaepernick issue was largely dead. Why is the NFL bringing it back up? And what I said at the time was, it's one of two things. Either an enormous piece of business, like something to do with the CBA that I couldn't imagine, or some kind of litigation. As it turns out, it is pretty clearly the case, in my view, that it's litigation. The NFL did this dog and pony show in order for Kaepernick to sign away his rights. That was the point of this, based especially on the new information.
Yeah, there was no question that the way this went down, it went down in a way that made no sense to anybody. Mm-hmm. And when you're looking at hearing from a party that you had already sued, mm-hmm. that you haven't spoken to since the settlement back in February, and then you get this call out of the blue when none of the teams were even aware that this was taking place, and on top of that, the Kaepernick team was forced to agree to this before the teams even knew that this was taking place. Absolutely, that you knew that something was happening here. But I think there was something else too that we need to talk about that took place on the ground there, and it was this idea that this whole